Hey, Sharita. You're muted.
Hey, hello, how are you?
I'm so good. How are you?
I'm well, I'm well. At Metromorphosis, we have a rule that if someone has to tell you that you are muted, you have to put $5 in. You've seen our pastor jar, right? That we had. You have to put it's not it's still the pastor jar, but it's for people who have to tell you're muted. So
I
but
love that.
it only applies when
For
it's for
Metro
the
Memphis
team.
calls.
Yeah. So it's so funny because that this has happened twice today where someone's told me that I was on mute, and I've gotten so good about checking it because I don't want to have to put the $5 in the box. But
That's what I should start instituting with all these people. Because Sharita, this is what I do. Honestly, I'm the WebEx master of the office, and so I'm constantly like, it's like Miss Maria, who's logged in now. I'm making sure that she's got on because she's been having audio problems. But I'm telling if everyone had to cash at me every single time, I had to mute them, unmute them, do whatever, I would be a wealthy woman and with
your future campaign would be funded, huh?
that would be great.
Yeah.
But on the other hand,
Yeah.
I've gained a lot of um, friends and trusted supporters in my customer service navigating of these
Oh,
WebEx
yeah.
situations.
So I was telling someone that I kind of like WebEx better than Zoom, and it's funny because I was all about Zoom for a while, and then they introduced Teams, and I was just like, I'm not switching. But now because so many people are using like virtual platforms, I'm involved in other meetings with Teams.
Mm-hmm.
Teams is better than Zoom. And then this is better than Teams. And so I'm like,
Really?
why is it? Yeah. Well, so I mean, I guess it depends on which features you care about.
Okay.
Um, I like that this has, and I don't know if maybe I'm just not doing it right in Zoom, but whenever I'm doing like presentations or sharing in Zoom, I'm not quite sure what the other side sees. Um, and with this one, you can, so you can see what they
You can,
see,
and
and
then there's so much control with it too, where you can
yeah,
even share like just a document instead of like your screen. You can share like just
exactly,
one window, which is so much nicer
exactly.
because then you can click other stuff around.
Exactly. And you can't do that in Zoom. And so
Right.
I like this one better. And with Teams, I think Teams is more maybe intuitive is the right word,
Mm-hmm.
but Teams doesn't let you control your view as much.
Mm. Yeah,
So
I feel like I haven't done much on Teams, but I feel like Teams is very like centrally like this is literally like team meetings. Like this is literally for the people in your office. And WebEx, it's got so many because you can do
yeah,
meetings, you can do events. There's even like a training feature. They have
right.
different like
Yeah.
portions of it.
Yeah. And maybe that's the thing with Teams because but yeah, so anyway, so it's just being on here. I find myself liking this a lot more. Of course, I mentioned it at Metro Morris's team meeting, and then Raymond goes, "I don't like it," and I'm like, "No, it's because you haven't gotten the full
No, it's
effect."
one of those things where there's definitely a bit of a learning curve to it, and it can be clunky because they're like updating and changing it all the time, and things change with it. So I get kind of frustrated with it sometimes because different issues pop up.
Mm-hmm.
But and Zoom is so great, like user friendly. But I tell
Mm-hmm.
people Zoom is way too user friendly to where you can, if you're not careful, people can get on and burn your whole house down. But with WebEx, it's like such a locked system to
Mm-hmm.
where like I have such total control and pretty much no one else does. So it's much easier to like keep it in
Mm-hmm.
house.
Yeah, I mean, well, I like it, and so I'm gonna keep pushing that we
Yeah,
we switch over. But
yep. We're the kings and queens of it at this point. So between doing Wellness Wednesdays, doing these meetings, various team meetings, we've done a ton of webinars, and that's what's so cool. I think you can stream from Zoom,
you can like, mm-hmm.
Facebook Live, and that's like my favorite part of this is like being able to like project all that. And again, it can be clunky sometimes, but I like it. But also,
Yeah.
I legitimately God, just a few weeks ago, I got onto my first. Is there a Google one?
Yeah, Google Meet.
Google Meet. I got on my first ever Google Meet. I was like, sorry y'all, this is so clunky. I'm not used to being the one that like can't figure out how to turn her audio on and off and like do the camera. I was like, I've literally only done stuff on WebEx. I've only been on like a handful of Zoom calls because like everything I'm doing, I'm like, well, I'm running it, so it's WebEx. So
Yeah. Well, and I like Google Meet. I mean, it's about as basic. It's not needlessly like, I mean, of course it could have some different features or whatever, but it's
but it's
not
pretty like
yeah. So I don't know. And then I haven't tried the Facebook one.
yeah, I don't even know. I don't even know anyone who's tried that one.
Um, I have a weekly phone call with all of my siblings. We're in different states.
Mm-hmm.
And we use like the messenger, like video chat in Messenger, but we haven't used the
Like actual.
or not Google, Facebook Rooms or whatever
Mhm.
it's called. So I don't know what that's like,
The
but I
new,
can't imagine. I
new
can't.
wave.
I feel like if you're on Facebook, you probably shouldn't be meeting or having a
Yeah,
serious
that makes me
conversation.
real nervous. Our IT department would not be about that.
Yeah.
That makes me. I feel like, I mean, I don't know the capabilities of it, but do you have to be Facebook friends? It's like, what if you want to meet with someone that's not? I guess it
Yeah,
is
I
more
don't know.
personal. I think that's the point. Is like it's more of like a instead of
Probably
getting your
so.
friends on a Zoom call and like you use someone's business account, you just like get on a Facebook.
Yeah, I guess so. But
Facebook's always trying to be on the latest wave, and they're good at that. So
yeah. I know you sent. I'm actually talking to myself, even though I was pretending to talk to you. Um, I was just making sure I had everything.
yep. Hey everyone.
Hi, hello. How's
Good
everybody doing?
to see you.
So
Jahi. Oh my goodness. Good to see you. Hi, Shrita. How are you? Hi,
I'm well.
Helen.
How are you, Casey?
Really good. Now that the first three people that I just saw is the three of y'all. That's amazing. All right. I'm really looking forward to
Well,
this. All
thank
right.
you.
It's so fun, Casey. You're gonna have a
That's
good
very kind.
Yeah, you're too kind, Casey.
Casey. I
Uh,
think you're just kind enough.
Oh, you know what? That's probably true, Helen.
and whenever I don't hit my threshold, people meet Alexis and my son, and then they're like,
And you're
oh,
like,
okay.
okay, we took it over the hump.
All right, I'll go to mute, but it's amazing to see all of you.
You too.
Hey Karen, thanks for joining us.
Hey, how are you?
Doing very well.
All your communications, they've been amazing.
Okay, good. I got lots of them. There could always be more too.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Hello, everyone. Making sure everyone can hear me. I'll get started in just a minute, but if you want to touch your audio, you're welcome to do so.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I lose the gig. I didn't even unmute myself. Mr. MacArthur, I think you need to unmute yourself if you want to test your audio. But can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, I can.
I can hear you.
Mr. Unglesby, is that you called in? Can you hear us?
Hey everyone, I just want to test my sound. I want to make sure I can hear.
We're going to get started in just a minute, but we can hear you. Can you hear us? Good.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Mayor's Commission on Racial Equity and Inclusion. Allow me to remind everyone that this is a public meeting and is being recorded. We thank you all for your continued dedication to the work that is being done in creating a more racially equitable city parish. And we will now hear from Kelvin about the purpose of tonight's panel discussion, I know that a few other people will be joining into the meeting, but for time purposes, we'd like to go ahead and get started. So Kelvin,
Yes, I'm here.
if you would go ahead and share opening remarks.
Yes, ma'am. Just the sound.
You'll have to unmute, Kelvin.
I did unmute. I'm not sure what's happening.
We can hear you, Kelvin. Hold on.
Can
Let
you
me
hear me?
click on Dr. Jones's sound, but you can go ahead and go, Kelvin.
Cool. Okay. So
Kelvin, you may
panel
be
discussion.
muted. I can't hear you.
Okay. Anyone else? Is anyone else not able to hear me?
Kelvin, I can hear you.
We can hear you.
I can hear you.
I can hear you as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so it's me. My apologies.
Cool. So tonight's panel discussion is centered around cultural competency, which is generally defined as the ability to understand, to communicate with, effectively interact with people who may have differing perceptions or worldviews or backgrounds than your own. And so what this requires is an increased level of self-awareness and a willingness to consider the unique viewpoints of other members of a team or coworkers, for example. And so because we have such a diverse commission and such a diverse group of institutional partners, we thought a panel discussion would be an excellent way to start to create this understanding and also to continue allowing this understanding to grow as our work together continues. So that's what tonight's panel discussion is about. Jones.
Good. Thank you, Kelvin. To facilitate tonight's panel discussion, we have Ms. Sharita Harrison. You may recall her lovely smiling face from just a few sessions before. Sharita has a love for community, which began nearly 20 years ago when she took her first job teaching basic literacy and employability skills to adults and adjudicated youth at a local community-based organization. In addition, while earning her undergraduate degrees from LSU. After earning her master's in counseling from ULL, she worked as an in-home therapist and personal development coach for families whose children were involved in the judicial system. It was then that she decided to return to her second home in Baton Rouge and to combine her educational experience with her mental health training and act as a liaison between community members, families, and students as they navigated the adult education system. Currently, Sharita is exploring, the interaction of low-skilled adults and community systems as a doctoral student at Capella University, while serving as the sustainability catalyst for Metromorphosis, where she provides general oversight of the organization's strategies, manages the team's development and culture, and steers its work with reentry providers. She's a fabulous lady with a wealth of experience and knowledge. It's a pleasure to have you here today, Sharita. And on our panel, we have the pleasure of having tonight Mr. Casey Phillips with the Walls Project. We also have Mr. Terrell Jackson of Perfect 10 Productions. We also have Mrs. Karen Alford of Visit Baton Rouge. We have Mr. Sam Sanders joining us with Mid-City Redevelopment Alliance. We also have Dr. Reva Hines of Southern University, Mr. Corey Wilson from Breck, and the last panelist is Honorable Judge Gail Grover. I want to thank each of the panelists who will serve as a catalyst for our conversation tonight. And I'll now hand it over to you, Ms. Sharita Harrison, to begin our discussion. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Jones, for those nice things that you said. And hello to everyone again. I'm so happy to be back with you. I really think you guys are doing important work. And so I'm so glad to share with you again and have this opportunity to kind of engage these wonderful people in a conversation around cultural competence and just exploring their background and experiences in the fields in which they serve. So we'll just jump right in because I know you guys have a lot to do. And I'll start. Let's start at the beginning. So when I was here last time, I spoke about how everyone is a system within themselves, right? We operate as a system. And so for our panelists, and we'll start, I guess we can start with Casey. Casey, can you talk about a time when your background and perceptions differed from maybe some of your coworkers or someone in your field, and what you learned from that experience?
Sure. Well, thank you, Sharita and Dr. Jones. It's good to see you again. So it's kind of been my whole career, right? I said, I think my first career was playing high school basketball and trying, in AAU, and I think summer basketball kind of was like my first culture clash, right? And moving to New Orleans for college opened my eyes culturally completely than what my Baton Rouge upbringing brought me. And then as I moved to the West Coast, that just continued to open my, open my eye, my third eye actually, and it really dismantled a lot of the things that I had learned growing up. My friend Bobby Thompson from Dialogue on Race always says that we all drank from the same Kool-Aid, right? And so kind of deconstructing that and kind of coming up with our own worldview. So in regards to the walls, I think that, there's 1,000 examples that I could give over the last 8 years with the work that we do, because our work is imperfect. A lot of times we're trying to do innovative things, and when you try things, sometimes it doesn't work. So during the 2019 MLK Fest on Winburn Avenue, we, we're working with the city and all of our partners, and for 6 months of planning meetings at Estruma High School and walking the neighborhood, canvassing, talking about what we were doing. We picked up abandoned tires up and down Winburn Avenue that were just there from the old Belmont and across the street from my neighbor all the way to Plank Road. And with an artist, we took all of those tires and created a prayer labyrinth in an abandoned lot that was overgrown. We cleared the lot and created kind of an art installation that was a walk, a peaceful meditative walk, and then planted like trees inside of it, painted them, tried to create a really cool piece of public art. And at the end of the day, the community, the neighborhood hated it. And with the best of intentions, right? Some people liked it, some people didn't, but at the end of the day, there was a misstep, right? Because ultimately we obviously didn't talk to enough people in the community, because there were folks that were really upset about it. And instead of digging in and fighting about it, we just basically sat there, we listened, and instead of reacting, we responded. And DPW, we cleaned it all up in 2 hours, and it was magically gone. And it was just like that. But yeah, I would say that that's a great experience of, again, no matter how culturally competent you think you are and how much the work you do on the ground is connecting, the community will let you know when you fall short, and we fell short. And I thought it was a great learning opportunity for our organization.
Thank you. Thank you. And Judge Grover, I would imagine being a Black judge and a lawyer in the South, you've definitely had some differing perceptions or experiences than your colleagues. Could you share an example of when you had a difference in perception or background and what that experience taught you? You're on mute, Judge? Okay.
Yes. And so, sure, let me share something that came to mind immediately. In doing the race equity and inclusion work, there was a lot of work put into reducing the number of youth of color, the proportion of youth of color that were admitted into the detention facility. And then even after admission, those who were released, and then those who were kept, or those whose parents refused to take them. And the differences in perception was very odd between the system employees and the system partners, as it compared to the child's perspective, who was directly impacted, even as to the parents' perspective and the community's perspective. So we did a little research and dived a little deeper into try to figure out why parents were refusing to take their kids home from detention when they were eligible to leave. And in doing that work, actually finding out that parents were refusing their children because either landlords said, if the child comes back, you have to move. So they were making the decision between where do I live and taking my child home. It wasn't, the purpose of detention is community safety or flight. And it wasn't because of either one of those, but it was a housing issue. Or it was because it was a respite. A grandparent raising a grandchild and just couldn't muster up the energy that it would take to manage a teenager. Or it was extensive mental health and could not get the services that they needed or didn't know how to navigate the system to get the services that were needed. Whereas system folks believing that parents didn't want their children, or that there was something terribly wrong and this family was dysfunctional. And so that was the core of the issue. And so digging through and being able to look culturally at how the decisions were made versus the system outlook on why decisions were made was very revealing. And in doing that research and actually talking to parents, and so for a period of 6 months, every time a parent would decline to take their child home, we actually created a process of talking to that parent to actually find out why. And we began to categorize the reasons why. And to everybody's surprise on thinking one way, finding out that it indeed had nothing to do with the parents, our kids of color parents not wanting them. Or even what most people thought is that they couldn't bond kids out. It really was some basic needs of, where will I live? Or I don't know how to get help, or my work, I can't do this and work. And so needing that support to undergird them so that they could indeed take their youth out. And so that was really one of those things when perception prevented folks from trying to problem solve. If you were thinking parents don't want a child, then you approach it differently than when you think that the parent don't know how to get resources for the child. Then you start to look different and you start to do different things in order to bridge that gap. And so that was very revealing, and even from our community perspective as to why we had kids in detention.
Thank you so much for that, Judge Grover. I'm going to switch over and ask you the same question, Dr. Riva. But before I do, for the commission members, if you all have questions, don't forget to use your chat box, because there will be a little time at the end of the panel for you to ask questions. So if you have questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat box. But Dr. Riva Hines, I wanted to come to you because Judge Grover said something. She talked about doing the research and understanding the community's perceptions and where you are working. And I know that you do research and you study communities. Can you talk a little bit about when you've had a difference in your perception or background from one of your colleagues and what that taught you?
Okay, sure. So in 2016, I was selected as a fellow for the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's interdisciplinary research program. And in that research, I was looking at housing as a public health issue in Baton Rouge. And we were looking at three basic things, which was housing affordability, neighborhood conditions, and housing conditions as markers or social determinants of, health in various neighborhoods in Baton Rouge. So we had, as part of the research, we had a standardized survey that we were conducting in addition to community conversations. And we asked questions on what does housing conditions mean to you, you know, and questions revolving neighborhood conditions and how do you view housing as a health issue. We kind of, my team conducted this research in two capacities. We did research with the community, and we also did research with the policy community. So we did that with community residents as well as with the policy community. And what we discovered taught us something about a disconnect that might exist, which explains well enough as to why sometimes even intentional policymakers sometimes, you know, are not able to fill the gap. So when we asked our residents what housing means to them and what housing conditions mean to them, they looked at housing as more of a construct rather than or as a building or a structure. So they talked about, you know, having a neighborhood park, and or they talked about connections within the community. They talked about you know, networking with other members, support groups, and things of that nature. While as when we talked to the policy community, we had a very different take from them, and they were very interested in, you know, the zoning laws and if, you know, the yards being cut, if things met regulation and things of that nature. So that was an eye-revealing process for us in our time of research, which taught us a lesson that, you know your audience and how your audience reacts to a question can well establish how it will be addressed. So the same questions that we asked our community members rendered us a very different picture versus the policy community rendered us a very different picture. So we knew that we needed to kind of reframe some of these things and come back to the policy community and kind of bring the policy community and the community residents together so that there can be a meeting of minds when it comes to these kind of issues. And apparently, you know, sometimes we wonder why policies are not made to address certain inequities and inequalities in our society. It very well might be that there is that policy gap that is never addressed. So that was certainly an eye-opening process for us in our research. And we have tried very hard from that time point on to make sure that we know our audience well enough to understand that questions, you know, when they're so broad and open-ended, can have some biases that might automatically come with it.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Dr. Hines. It sounds like when you talk about the policy and even the way you word the questions, that can act as a barrier sometimes, right? And so can you talk a little bit about some of the barriers you've seen to the creation of cultural competency in your work or in the city in general? Any barriers to cultural competency you've seen?
So one of the things that comes to my mind is when we were conducting some of our community conversations with some of our community residents, initially, you know, we would start these community conversations with talking about, you know, there are so many things going on wrong in this neighborhood. How can we change it? How do we drive this force to make this community better? And we always thought that this was a great way to kind of start our conversations. And we were still in our infancy, and I'm talking about in 2016 when we have started this concept of community conversations. And as we were going through this in the community, one of the community members pulled me to the side and said, you know, Reva, she said, it would be really great if we start talking about assets in our community and have discussions and dialogues based on the asset-based discussion rather than a deficit-based discussion. She said, we love our community. We had opportunities to move away from this community plenty times, but we did not. We decided to stay here because we love this community. So it would be great if you started asking us what we like about this community and then use that to build and augment our community rather than asking us what we don't like about this community and what needs to be fixed. So that certainly can serve as a barrier, is, sometimes we have this cultural blindness that comes into play when we are trying to talk to people, and cultural blindness is definitely a barrier to cultural competency. So being thoughtful of that process is important. Having an asset-based discussion is important, as well as a discussion that has its framework around equity at its heart is going to be important in order to address why there are disparities in marginalized communities around the city, state, and in the nation.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Sam Sanders, let's talk barriers. What are some of the barriers you've seen in your work when it comes to cultural competency in the city?
Hear me?
We can.
Sorry. I would, as I've been listening to everybody else up to this point, I think the key for me is one of the main barriers is we, the individual, can be the barrier. Sometimes we have to focus on getting out of our own way, getting out of our own head, and understand that in doing any work in the community, it's not about what you think. It's about the folks that are affected. How do you help them achieve whatever it is that they would desire? The example I'll give is really picking up on what Casey said, but one of the ways that I kind of taught myself this, took this position on for myself is when I first started this work, I believe that we as a team come together, figure out what needs to be done for the community. We've diagnosed the problem. Now let's go out and solve it. And never once did we really pull the people in who live in those neighborhoods to tell us what they think. How do they prioritize things? What issues do they see so that they can be prioritized accordingly? And our approach today is very much different than that. We believe in investing in the residents themselves. So we're looking for leaders in the neighborhoods to come and let us teach you how to do what you want to do, give you the assets and the resources to do what it takes to make the change happen. And for us, it's about understanding and appreciating that they have something to bring to the conversation, to that table, and respecting whatever it is that they would like to see as the priority for that neighborhood, not what I would like to see as the priority. And from that, we can work together and get more accomplished. So I think a lot of it is us getting out of our own way.
Thank you. And Corey Wilson, certainly at BREC, you may have encountered some differences in perceptions and backgrounds. Have there been any barriers that you have witnessed to cultural competency in your work?
Hey, Sharita. To sort of echo what Sam said, sometimes a barrier is simply lack of knowledge or lack of access. And so I have to be careful now as a policymaker that I know the history behind a lot of things. It is incumbent upon me, and I think about it often that, I'm a policymaker, and I have the opportunity to look at barriers that we have in place from a policy standpoint and try and make a difference there. One of the barriers that we talk about, certainly from a DBE participation standpoint, is the bonding requirement sometimes, and how that can, it can be presented as, hey, we just want to make sure we have protection of our assets, and if you walk off the job and those sort of things like that. But there's a reason that small companies or minority companies don't have the ability to do that, and that's because of historical inequities that didn't provide the same access to those minorities' ancestors and great grandfathers that non-minorities and had the ability to to do those sort of things. So just being aware of those potential barriers out there, as Sam said, often trying to reach out to the community and being open enough to hear feedback on, is there something I'm missing? What do you guys want to see? How can we better serve you? Just having that sense of awareness, I think, is one of the big barriers.
Thank you, thank you. And Dr. Reba mentioned that, the community had talked a lot about a lot of times people focus on those limitations, right? But that they wanted to talk about the assets, those good things. And so let's switch from barriers. Miss Karen, can you talk about some of the unique assets that diversity brings to Baton Rouge? What have you seen either personally or professionally that counts as, that contributes to just this wonderful place where we live?
So yes, thank you. So I work in the tourism industry, and of course, this is a very big topic. We have a great diverse community here in Baton Rouge, and I think sometimes we get so stuck in our circles, we don't tend to focus on what is around us or what this parish is really made up of. And some of the work that we're doing is really kind of showcasing the diverse assets that this community has, and introducing people to faces we may not know or understand or may be different from us, but how do we bring them into the conversation? How do we bring people from all walks of life into a conversation? It's just amazing what we have. One of the projects that we worked on prior to Miss Sadie Roberts Joseph's death was really working very closely with her on her mission and how do we get that story out. That was an amazing asset to our community, herself, and her work that she did and her passion that she had. We had the opportunity to make a video of her in progress, doing what she loved best and really putting that out and promoting Juneteenth, something that she was so passionate about, and letting the world see that and know that that was right here in Baton Rouge. And you can see that, you can experience the museum. So I think we've got a lot to be proud, to be happy about. It's just making sure that we're recognizing everything that we have and talking about it, so that people know what's out there.
Yeah. Casey, you have to be probably one of the most positive people that I've ever met. And so I could not let you talk about the assets that diversity brings to Baton Rouge. What have you seen around Baton Rouge that only having such a diverse population, a diverse city as we do can bring?
Yeah, this is actually, so when I first, it feels like a lifetime ago, because specifically on this, I find that the diversity in leadership positions, I find the beginning diversity in the boardrooms of lots of municipal agencies, nonprofits, and especially young diversity, young voices that are being empowered is probably, to me, something that's happening here that maybe in other major cities, like in Dallas, where we do some work, it's a little bit harder to kind of crack through that. But in Baton Rouge, it's really starting to like embrace it. And where I'm seeing the changes is that the people who are the practitioners are now, they have a different relationship with data evaluation, right? They have a different relationship with funding streams. There's a focus on getting more DBE contracts into the supply chain. There's a focus on more diverse philanthropic dollars to, organizations that are led by men and women of color. So to me, that's what, I mean, truly, like, I know we're never satisfied and, we're never where we are. But if you just kind of take a step back and you look at where we've come in the last 10 years, I really feel that everything has been accelerated in the last 3 to 4 years at an exponential rate. And it does inspire me that change is coming.
Yeah. Thank you. Sam, any assets you want to point out?
I've always referred to Baton Rouge as being a place that's full of opportunity. I think we, as a city, we beat the city up a lot, and some of it is due. I think, being honest, we have our issues and we need to work on those. But I do believe that we've got to continue to put in the work and do the effort to really get deeper than the surface, and recognize that we have two experiences in the city. There's a Black experience and a white experience, and they do not come together very well. And that is something that this commission is really intending to focus on, and we've got to do more of that if we're ever going to realize that potential.
Thank you. Thank you. And members, I definitely want you all to have some time to ask questions. So please use the chat box if you have questions. We have a little bit of time. But Sam, because you just said this, and I think it's important, Judge Grover, speaking of experiences, because this commission is about racial equity and inclusion, what do you think is one thing that you would like this group to know when it comes to their work around racial equity and inclusion? What do they need to know?
The first thing that comes to mind to me is the inclusion piece. And someone spoke of young people and how they have so much energy and they bring so much to the table right now. Their world is so much bigger than our world was at their age. And so their contribution is just, I mean, we can't move forward into the future without their voices being very clear and authentic. Not patronizing, but very authentic in hearing them. And I know in the past, sometimes we bring people to the table and their language barriers. You could be talking about the same thing, but there is a different understanding, whether it's generational or whether it's cultural. And so spending some time in that, in being and having the inclusion to make sure that we are all talking and understanding the same, and not necessarily trying to teach them or teach whomever is you're bringing into the inclusion, but taking some time to actually let them teach you. There's an exchange. There is a level of saying we want race, equity, and equality, and then we bring them to the table and say, hey, let me teach you how to do this. And the inequities and the inequality starts at the table, because we're never saying teach us, about you. So from the very beginning of the conversation, it's very obvious that that there needs to be some dialogue to put everybody on the same level of understanding. So that's the piece that that comes to mind really quickly, is the inclusion piece and being authentic and genuine in bringing folks to the table.
Certainly, authentic engagement in the community is one of the key aspects, I think, to building a strong community and a strong city. Ms. Karen, what do you think this group should know? What's the one thing they should know as they work toward racial equity and inclusion?
I have to agree. I just, continue to keep that open mind. Where you feel uncomfortable, those are the topics that need to come up, and those are the topics that need to discuss, because that means that we're digging deep enough, that we're uncovering those things. This community, like Sam said, is full of opportunity. I couldn't agree more. I've been here for 25 years, and the growth that we've seen has been amazing, but there is so much more work to do. And a lot of it does revolve around this issue. We can be a leader in this area, in this arena, and I can't wait to see the work that you come up with. But I definitely think we need to get outside of our comfort zone so we can truly look at this conversation and address the issues.
Thank you. And we have a question from one of our commission members. And so, how can young leaders such as myself, engage the younger community leaders when it relates to inclusion and understand the importance of diversity? And so I'll open this to any one of the panelists that has an answer. But Casey, I know you work with youth a lot, and so maybe you can kick us off. So how can young leaders engage the younger community when it comes to inclusion and understanding the importance of diversity?
Yeah, so Tara, thank you for the question, and nice to connect. Kind of like what Jahi did, it's like you have two options really as a young leader. You either find an organization that just doesn't just open the door, but swings it wide open and gets out the way as you walk in to be able to start making an impact, or you start your own thing. So that's the first and foremost. The fact that you're a young leader gives you a competitive edge because you're not trying to figure out how to connect to young people. There are so many people on this call in their 30s, 40s, and 50s that spend 5 to 10 hours a week trying to figure out how to connect to people who are young like you. So you already got that because you are one. And, at the end of the day, like the Futures Fund, I mean, there are organizations that believe in youth empowerment. So organizations that say youth development, youth empowerment, find your voice. These are the kind of organizations to me that are trying to cultivate the next generation of community leaders and looking for that near peer mentorship opportunity, such like yourself, to be able to engage, someone in their early 20s to someone who's 14 or 15. I mean, you are it. Right? Like to be able to have a conversation with someone in college or just out of college that is a shared experience and is where they want to be. I mean, it's invaluable just sitting down and having one-on-one conversations, if not 5 or 10 young people that you're mentoring.
Thank you. Any other panelists want to talk about engaging youth before I go to our next question from the commission member?
Yes. Okay, and so this engaging young people and empowering them, very good terms, but actually transferring that power to them is really, I've been finding, is the key. It's one thing to say, I want to engage you and I want your opinion and, tell me, but saying you have the decision-making authority to the limit that the law will allow or policy will allow, and maybe even putting some, some parameters around where and how that decision, needs to land, but then giving it to them and you be the element of giving them suggestions or sharing an idea, but the decision-making, if we really want to engage them, then you can't tell people that you want to hear them and they're important, but they get to make no decisions, right?
Ooh, judge you. I'm giving snaps.
And so, and allowing that space for you to make that decision and then make those mistakes because we still make them. We still make them. So giving you that and lean into what you want. And share our experiences and sharing our mistakes too, and then allowing you folks to make those decisions and then be ready to catch you when you fall, be ready to lean in when we see that things are getting off track. But I think that's when our young adults say, you trust me.
Thank you, Judge. At Metromorphosis, we're beginning to explore the concept of intergenerational leadership and talking about just that concept, Judge Grover. What does it look like when you transfer power, right, from someone who is more experienced in work to someone who is up and coming and emerging? So a pretty powerful concept. And Tara, if you're interested in that intergenerational and youth leadership, there's some literature at Encore that talks a lot about how people are doing that, encore.org. Judge Grover, while I have you, because there are a couple of questions here, but these are questions that I think can be answered by any one of the panelists. Dr. Hines and Corey, I haven't heard your voice in a while, so feel free to jump in here. But Judge Grover, the question is, can you suggest some venues or opportunities where the commission members can begin to have those conversations so that they can listen and understand better?
Right. And so the question then that we should say is, where are young people? Where are the individuals we want to engage? Where are they naturally positioned? Instead of saying, we're going to set a meeting and we're going to invite them into our space. Right. And so it's looking to where they live, where they play, where they build their future and their hope. And then ask permission to come into that space. And then when you come into that space, expect respect that space and their thoughts, and then that's real relationship. And so, and I think that's where we start to have the true engagement, and because our young peoples are smart and they get it, they see us a mile away. And so, and at that point, then I think you begin to build the relationships that then the work can be done as you strengthen that relationship. But we go to where they are and stop expecting people to always come to us.
Good stuff. Corey, you look like you want to jump in.
Yeah, just to add to the judge's comments, I love her thoughts and ideas about us going to the young people and not inviting the young people certainly to come to us. But in terms of places for anyone to meet, parks are sort of quintessential gathering place for folks from all walks of life to be able to come. And so certainly as we have these discussions regarding inclusion and equity, oftentimes a park is the most comfortable place for someone to be considered neutral ground. So we certainly, have hundreds of facilities around the parish where we will welcome any group, including young people. And even at our parks, we have a skate park where young people hang out at. To the judge's point, we can certainly engage those young people right where they are and doing what they're doing, whether it's a basketball court where there's 50 or 60 young people hanging out, to engage them in their environment. So
yeah.
I think you muted yourself by mistake.
I muted myself. I was trying to unmute. Look at that. 3 times today, I tell you. So I would encourage all the panelists to look in the chat. Judge Grover, specifically, there is another question for you, but we have time for one more question. And I want to, it's such a great question. I want to open it to all the panelists. So I want to make sure we have some time before you guys have to break out into your groups. The question is, race intersects with so many other identities that we have. So have any of you ever felt disconnected or misunderstood from someone who was of the same race, but identified in some other, a different form than you? So that can be generational identity, nationality, social class, religion. And then were you able to educate yourself or someone else at the point of conflict? So again, same race, but a different identifier. Have you experienced the conflict and what came out of it? And I'd like to open it up to all the panelists. Dr. Reba, would you like to start us off? Look, Dr. Reba, if you're talking, you're on mute. But there you go.
Yes.
And did we lose her?
We lost her. She'll call back in.
Okay. Casey, how about you?
Yeah, quite a bit actually. Yeah, quite a bit. And it's not, there's no need for any white tears of fragility here, but by being a Caucasian identifying male in Baton Rouge, doing work predominantly in North Baton Rouge, there's a lot of dynamics that go with that. And I really don't count the amount of people, whether it's young or my age or older, that are Caucasian, that simply have such strong views on the work that we do and just simply don't get it. So that's the reason why, if you ever see me in public, I always thank Maxine Crump for the gift of 2010 going through Dialogue on Race, so that I can breathe through questions, ask 5 questions, and let people kind of come to their own truth and just present historical context of privilege and institutional racism, and being able to have those conversations. Sometimes you just don't have the life energy to take it on, but that is a job that I feel that white allies can't run from, and that's part of our role in society. Is you have to have those conversations with Caucasian folks that don't think that there's any racism left in America. Happens all the time.
You're muted, Sharita.
I can't get it together. It's getting, the later it gets, the worse I get. I'm sorry about that. So Sam, how about you? Same race, but different identifier. Has there been a conflict?
Yes, but I don't know how to go beyond that. It's commonplace. Differences exist. People look at you, they question your motives, even when you have the sincerest of intentions. Many times I think I found myself trying to be the eternal diplomat and just say, look, if you want this to happen, let's make it happen. If you don't want it to happen, say so, and I will communicate that as well. Because you don't always understand why people are in the place that they're in to take the position that they take. I think what you have to do is just accept it. And sometimes you walk away. It may be that you wanted to do something, and because folks told you they don't want you to be the one to do it, then you just move on.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Riva came back, so we'll let her answer the question, followed by Miss Karen, and then we will wrap up with Corey to answer this question. Dr. Riva?
Sorry, my internet just completely went blank, so I'm on my hotspot. We should be okay. When I think about inclusion among racial backgrounds, or whatever the demographics might be, race, age, education, whatever it is, but especially when it comes to inclusivity as it relates to race or the youth, sometimes it can be hard to engage individuals depending on how you approach them. And we run into this kind of risk mainly when we're talking about marginalized individuals, or we are talking about the youth population, because we often run the risk of under the mask of inclusiveness, because EDI is the buzzword now. Everyone wants to talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion without really knowing what it means. And sometimes we kind of run into the risk of people that we want to sit at the table becoming tokenistic, right? A youth at the table, or a racial background at the table, or a marginalized community person at the table. We run this risk of them becoming tokenistic. And that's usually there because of what Judge Grover really nicely put it, because of this concept of control that we want to take. So, it is important to have this decentralized approach to conducting affairs. And true participation among the varied racial backgrounds and marginalized communities and young people will only come when there is full understanding of what we want to really achieve in terms of equity, in letting these populations know that their input is important, and then carrying through and following through up on that in order to make sure that they are not only sitting at a table, but they're actually there and making constructive contributions, that they're involved in the decision-making process, they're involved in the carrying it out process, and they're also involved in the sustainability of those efforts from just offering suggestions. So when you show these groups ownership, I think you will have more coming in, because then you're not just a number or a token to show a committee how you had a diverse population. So I think we have to be very careful, whatever demographics, even the aged, when we're reaching out to this population, that they don't end up being tokenistic in nature, and true involvement goes in establishing a decentralized network and a decentralized structure. And it's hard to do because most of us are very, used to this hierarchical ways of dealing with things, that we need to break those boundaries in order to engage in holistic participation.
Ooh, Dr. Riva, that was, I know, right? Karen and Corey, close us out with how have you been educated by an interaction or have you been able to educate someone else in an interaction of someone of the same race, but maybe a different other identifier?
I'm going to go the route of generations. There are so many factors going on there and so many negatives that are often perceived because of the generation one falls in. But I think if we would be more open and inclusive and stop focusing on the age of a person or the experience of a person, we could really learn so much more from each other. I think, especially for those that fall within the boundaries of a generation, you see some people choosing to go either higher or lower, just so that they feel they could be included. So I would go that route.
Yeah, and so I would add, Sharita, in terms of someone identifying differently than that. I mean, that happens, but I think it's important to allow that. I oftentimes, because of a lot of things that have happened historically, in terms of from slavery until today, there are often times where, we want to all have this one thought where, Black people think this way, or Black people, are all Democrat. And so I think it's important to allow differences, but I also think it's important to back to Casey's point, as well as Sam's point, to being able to acknowledge facts in history in terms of let's agree on history, right? There was slavery, right? There was Jim Crow, right? There was inequities, and we can't just say, okay, everything is fair now, then we're all on the same playing field, when we weren't on the same playing field for hundreds of years. And so it doesn't magically become equal all of a sudden. Likewise, I oftentimes, because I grew up in a impoverished neighborhood, housing projects and something, and then ultimately went to Harvard Law School and now am superintendent of BREC, oftentimes people say, well, that's an example that racism does not exist. You made it, you know what I mean? And so oftentimes, it's like, well, just because Barack Obama's president, Corey's superintendent of BREC, everyone doesn't have those opportunities, the access to that. And that's where we have to, be able to provide to make sure that everyone can do that. And, it's like, I had the opportunity, similar to Casey, to just recently in January of 2019, the Race and Equity Institute out of North Carolina did a day and a half session on racism. And so even at, the age of 45, Harvard educated, I was able to learn some things about race and how it started and how we are here today. And I don't think we can just assume everyone understands that, and so we have to meet people with it where they are and be able to have them being comfortable about not knowing history, to being able to say, hey, I didn't know this 5 years ago, but guess what I've learned, and this is what I've learned, and this is how. So I think we have to be open and accommodating to allow differences of opinion, but also firm on the history, the facts, and how do we move forward. So I know I said a lot and maybe didn't say anything, but those are my thoughts.
No, that was great. And on that note, you guys, thank you so much. Judge Grover, Sam, Miss Karen, Casey, Dr. Reva, and Corey. It was a pleasure having this conversation with you. Commission members, there you have it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sharita, for organizing and keeping us on task.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
And so Dr. Jones, I believe.
Yes. So thank you so much for this impactful, enriching conversation that we just had. I always say in panel discussions, I take copious notes, and I really do. I would be remiss, Sharita, if I did not, if I can have Helen 2 seconds of time here. I just heard so much that we all drink from the same Kool-Aid, and then we develop our worldviews. That's what Casey said. And then Judge Grover was talking about misperceptions and how perceptions stop us from really solving the root of the problem, and looking culturally on what decisions were made is where we need to go. We heard tonight from Dr. Riva so much great stuff about community conversations, and to start our conversations talking about asset-based discussions and not from the deficit place. I also wrote down that we need to know our audiences, and that there are cultural barriers such as cultural blindness, and discussions around the framework of equity should be at the heart of our discussions. Sam began to tell us about we the individuals can often get in our own way. And that's why we need to bring in the folks that actually affect us. He even said that there are two experiences in Baton Rouge. There's a white experience and a Black experience, and that there are many barriers, but we have to pull the people in and begin to talk to them. Corey told us about barriers such as lack of knowledge and access, and that there's a history behind every subject matter, that we have to be aware, we have to be open to receive feedback. Karen talked about how unique Baton Rouge is, the assets that exist here, and the diverse people that make up the city, that we are really a great diverse community. We need to introduce ourselves to new faces. It's all about recognition and talking about assets first. We also heard, just as a kind of concluding thoughts, Casey was talking about bringing young voices of empowerment to the discussion, and he's inspired that change is coming. And then we had Judge Grover, who taught us about authentic engagement versus transferring that power and asking for permission to come into that space. As we finalize the discussion, we heard that we need to meet people where they are, that they're often misunderstood individuals. And Casey, help me if I got this right, white tears of fragility, you talked about, and then being the eternal diplomat. I think that was Sam who spoke on that. And then we need to be careful, as Reba mentioned, about tokenistic situations, an invitation to sit different individuals at the table, but establishing a decentralized structure to holistic partnership. These were rich conversations tonight, and I hope I did our notes. I had more, but I hope I did our notes a little bit of fairness here. I want to mention to everyone, Sharita, thank you for moderating that. We have a request that those of you who are on the call, that you actually go into the break rooms. And so that invitation is not only for the members, but also for the institutional partners. And so I think I am supposed to mention who is facilitating each of those. So for education, health, and human services will be myself, Dr. Jones. Arts, culture, and community nonprofits, Helen and Talasha. The room is open already for you all. Community and economic development, Beneath and Kelvin will be hosting that one. Government entities, Jared. And then we also have our historical recognition will actually be on Monday. Again, thank you to everyone. Check your emails for the links to the work group, specific the WebEx calls that you're going to be joining at the end of this event. And if you have any trouble linking in, please connect with Helen. You can dial that number 225-427-5005. Helen will be there to help you to get in if you have a problem with connection. And we do need to start as soon as possible. So thank you all, Sharita. Thank you again. And to our panelists, what a wonderful job tonight. I was enriched, and I hope our team takes a lot away from this. Thank you kindly.
Thanks, Dr. Jones. I'm going to hang out until make sure everyone gets over. The links are also in the chat if you need them.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay,
Hey,
so where are
so-
the links?
Yeah, Helen, you're smarter than me. Where in the chat?
Yes.
So if you click, do you have the chat open, Casey? Click the little message bubble at at the bottom. You should scroll up. They're talking about Black, Indigenous, and people of color. If you scroll up, Casey, your arts, culture, and community nonprofit. So just click that link, and that should pull up another event for you to log into.
And so I'm in the chat, but I don't see.
Yeah, me either.
Interesting. Okay, let me chat them to you individually, Judge Grover, since you are. Okay, let's see. Casey, here's your link.
Oh, the pressure, Helen, you got it.
This is
River, it's a pleasure to see you twice in the same day. So, listen, it's great to see you, Gail. You have a great day.
You as well.
And then Judge Grover, here's your link.
I will likely need a link to
Okay,
yeah,
so
'cause I don't see
government entities. Okay, here's your link.
So am I have the historical recognition, or am I in governmental?
You are historic recognition.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And what about me?
Corey's with me.
Your government entities as well. Let me send you that link.
I just clicked, it said event not found.
For government entities?
Mm-hmm.
Hold on, give me just 1 second.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm here. Did you read Morning Advocate about street renaming report targets 25 New Orleans roads?
Have I read that? No, I've not read it this morning. Okay, hold on. All right, I'm unmuted now.
Sharita, I'm looking at an email from Helen on August the 20th that has a link.
Okay. Let me.
Yeah, Corey, try that link and tell me if that. Well, I guess. Well,
When I clicked on it, it said I need to leave this meeting in order to join.
do that. Yeah, do that.
Yeah.
Okay, let me send you that link too, Sharita, if you need that one. I don't know why this one.
Oh, I see the email.
Yeah.
Let me try that.
I'm gonna close out
Stay
of this.
there.
Okay.
Yeah, stay here, Ellie. I'll come back if I need to.
Okay.
I don't really know how do I leave? Where's the thing?
You should mouse around and hit an X.
Yeah, I can't. It's not. Why? It's not coming up. The little.
Well, I can kick you out.
Go ahead and do that because it's not coming up like the little thing at the bottom for chat and all that. Okay.
Yeah, weird.
Okay, there it is.
You got it?
I had to close something. Okay.